I stood at that mahogany table, watching my father's hand come down across my face like thunder. The sting burned hot against my cheek as my mother's voice cut through the dining room air. "You have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house, Grace. This was never yours to begin with." The crystal chandelier above cast cruel shadows across their faces. My 3 siblings, Mark, Sarah, and David, kept eating their roast beef like nothing happened. Fork scraping plate, ice clinking in glasses. The grandfather clock in the corner ticking away those precious 10 minutes. "But Dad, the will clearly states I started," my voice shaking. "The will?" My father's laugh was bitter. "Sweetheart, that document you've been counting on? We had it, revised. $2 million in property and assets, all redistributed among your siblings who actually deserve it." My mother smiled, that cold smile I'd seen her give waitresses and store clerks. "You see, Grace, while you were playing house with that teacher husband of yours in your little apartment, we were making real decisions, adult decisions." The room spun. 23 years I'd cared for them. 23 years of Sunday dinners, hospital visits, managing their medications when they got older. The house I grew up in, the one Grandma promised would stay in the family, gone. "Sarah helped us find the right lawyer," Mom continued, cutting her meat with surgical precision. "Someone who understands that inheritance should go to children who contribute, not ones who married beneath themselves." I grabbed my purse with trembling hands. My car keys felt ice cold against my palm. Behind me, David cleared his throat and asked if anyone wanted more wine. As I walked toward the front door, that same door I'd painted bright yellow at age 12, I heard Mark whisper to Sarah, "Think she'll contest it?" "With what money?" Sarah whispered back, then giggled. I stood on the porch steps, breathing in the October air. Maple leaves crunched under my feet. Streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows down Elm Street. My phone was already buzzing in my coat pocket, but I didn't check it yet. 10 minutes later, sitting in my Honda Civic, I finally looked. 23 missed calls, 17 voicemails. My father's voice on the latest message, cracked, desperate. "Grace, honey, wait, please don't do this. We can talk." I typed 2 words back. "Too late." Before we continue with how I turned their own greed against them, I want to thank those of you who support these stories. Your contributions help me share these moments of truth with others who need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to mean defeat. Every share, every comment, every small gesture of support plants seeds of hope for someone facing their own family betrayal. That night, staring at my ceiling, I smiled for the first time in hours. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Justice wouldn't come from any courtroom, it would come from something far more personal. I sat in that Honda Civic for 20 minutes, engine running, heat blasting against the October chill. The silence after their betrayal felt heavier than the slap itself. My cheek still burned, but it was nothing compared to the fire spreading through my chest, 23 years of devotion crumbling into dust. I gave them everything. And in return, I was disposable. The memories hit me like waves, each one sharper than the last. I was 22 when Dad's construction business nearly went bankrupt. I remember standing in that same dining room, writing him a check for $12,000, my entire savings, money I'd scraped together from 2 waitressing jobs and weekend catering gigs. "Just until we get back on our feet, Gracie," he'd promised, tears in his eyes. "You're saving the family." I never saw that money again. But Mark got his MBA at Columbia the next year. Then there was Mom's cancer scare at 58. 3 months of chemotherapy, and guess who took unpaid leave from my teaching job to drive her to every appointment? Me. While Sarah was too busy with her marketing career in Manhattan, and David claimed his law practice couldn't spare him, I held Mom's hand through every IV drip, every bout of nausea. I can still smell that hospital antiseptic, mixed with the vanilla lotion I'd rub on her hands when they got too dry from the treatments. "What would I do without you, sweetheart?" she'd whispered. "You're my angel." Angel. The word tasted bitter now. The house, God, that house. Grandma Rose left it to all of us, but I was the only one who moved in, the only one who cared. Every leaky faucet, every broken window, every mortgage payment when Dad's business struggled again and again and again. I painted those yellow shutters 3 times in 5 years. I planted Mom's rose garden, the one she'd brag about to her book club friends. "Grace has such a green thumb," she'd say. never mentioning the $100 Home Depot trips I made every spring, or the hours I spent on my knees in the dirt after 12-hour days at Lincoln Elementary. I remembered Christmas mornings in that living room. Mark unwrapping his new MacBook, the one I'd paid for because he needed it for networking. Sarah showing off her diamond earrings, my graduation gift to her when she finished business school. David's law school loan payments, quietly handled through automatic transfers from my checking account for 4 years straight. There's a photo on my dashboard from last Christmas. All of us around that mahogany table, smiling. Mom's arm around my shoulder, Dad raising his wine glass in a toast. To family, the only thing that really matters. I picked up that photo now, studying their faces. Had they already decided then? Had they already been to the lawyer, already planned to cut me out while I was buying their groceries, paying their insurance premiums, fixing their problems? They called me a burden while living off my back. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Dad, probably. Or maybe Sarah, ready to play peacemaker now that the dirty work was done. I didn't check. Instead, I stared at that house through my windshield, the house I'd kept alive with my own blood, sweat, and savings for over 2 decades. The front porch light was still on. The one I'd installed last summer when Mom complained about the dark steps. Through the dining room window, I could see them still sitting around that table, probably dividing up my share, planning what to do with the inheritance they'd stolen. But as I sat there in the cold, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The shaking in my hands stilled. 23 years of being the family doormat was about to end, and they had no idea what kind of storm they'd just created. Tomorrow, I would show them exactly who they'd thrown away. Tomorrow, I would show them exactly who they'd thrown away. But first, I needed to understand exactly what they'd done. I drove home to my small apartment on 82nd Street, but sleep was impossible. At 2 a.m., I found myself back in my car, parked 3 houses down from the family home. Call it intuition, call it desperation, but something told me this night wasn't over for them either. I was right. Through the dining room window, I could see them still gathered around that mahogany table, not eating anymore, plotting. Mark had papers spread across the surface. Sarah was typing on her laptop, and Mom and Dad were huddled together, whispering, at 2 a.m. Who holds family meetings at 2 a.m. unless they're hiding something? My hands trembling, I slipped through the backyard gate, the same gate I'd fixed last spring when the hinges broke. I still had my key to the back door. After all, until tonight, this was supposed to be my house too. The kitchen was dark, but voices carried clearly from the dining room. I pressed myself against the doorframe, heart hammering so loud I was sure they'd hear it. The revised will is bulletproof, Mark was saying, his lawyer voice confident and cold. Dad and Mom are mentally competent. No history of coercion. Grace can't contest a thing. What about the house repairs she paid for? David asked. She's got receipts going back 5 years. Sarah laughed, actually laughed. So what? She was living here rent-free. Call it back rent. My knees nearly buckled. Rent-free? I'd paid the mortgage for 3 years straight. The beautiful part, Mom's voice, sweet as poison, is that she won't even try to fight it. She never does. Remember when we used her college fund for Mark's MBA? She just accepted it. Family comes first, Mom, she said. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Dad rustled through papers. The house appraisal came back at $1.2 million. Split 4 ways instead of 5. That's $300,000 each instead of $240,000. She just cost herself $60,000 by being difficult tonight. She was getting too comfortable anyway, Sarah added, closing her laptop with a sharp click. Acting like she owned the place just because she pays a few bills. A few bills? I'd been covering their property taxes, insurance, utilities, everything. My bank statements would prove it, if anyone bothered to look. Mark cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Grace's savings account, the one she thinks we don't know about. My blood turned to ice water. The emergency fund she's been building? Mom asked. $43,000, Mark said, and I heard papers rustling. I've been managing her finances since Dad's business troubles started. She signed power of attorney forms 3 years ago, remember? When she was helping with the bankruptcy paperwork? I had signed something, a stack of legal documents Mark said would help protect the family assets. I'd trusted him completely. We can transfer that money tomorrow, he continued. She'll never notice until it's gone. By then, we'll have documentation showing it was used for legitimate family expenses. David chuckled. She's so trusting, it's almost sad. Sad? Sarah's voice turned sharp. It's pathetic. A 45-year-old woman with no husband, no kids, living off her family like some kind of spinster aunt. At least now she'll have to get a real life. The room spun around me. $43,000 money I'd saved teaching summer school for 5 years, tutoring kids on weekends, selling my grandmother's jewelry piece by piece, money I'd planned to use for a down payment on my own place. Finally. When do we move forward? Mom asked. Bank opens at 9 a.m., Mark replied. I'll handle the transfer first thing. Sarah, you file the will paperwork with probate. David, start preparing the eviction notice just in case she tries to come back here claiming squatters' rights. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, switching it to record mode. The red dot appeared on screen. 11:47 p.m. And if she gets suspicious? Dad asked. She won't, Mom said with absolute certainty. Grace has never questioned a single thing we've done. She's too grateful to be part of this family to make waves. Grateful. The word hit like another slap. I stayed pressed against that doorframe for 43 minutes, recording every word, every laugh, every casual mention of my destruction. When they finally started clearing the table, discussing tomorrow's timeline, I slipped back through the kitchen and out the back door. Sitting in my car, staring at my phone, I watched the recording file save. 43 minutes and 17 seconds of pure evidence. 43 minutes that would change everything. They called me grateful. Tomorrow they'd learn the difference between gratitude and rage. They called me grateful. Tomorrow they'd learn the difference between gratitude and rage. But I didn't call them that night. I didn't storm back in screaming. I didn't even cry. Instead, I sat in my Honda Civic until dawn, listening to that 43-minute recording over and over, memorizing every word, every laugh, every casual mention of my financial destruction. They thought I'd collapse. Instead, I was building. At 6 a.m., I drove to an all-night diner on Route 9 and ordered black coffee. While it cooled, I made a list. Not an emotional rant, a battle plan. Lawyers, banks, documents, evidence. Every weapon they'd unknowingly handed me during 23 years of blind trust. My first call was to Margaret Chen, the estate attorney who'd handled Grandma Rose's will. Her secretary said she could squeeze me in at 8 a.m. emergency consultation. Grace, Margaret said, studying the recording transcript I'd typed up at 4 a.m. This island. Extensive. Your brother committed several felonies last night just by discussing this plan. She pulled out a thick folder Grandma Rose's original will, filed 6 years ago. Every page notarized, witnessed, ironclad. The house was left to all 5 siblings as joint tenants with right of survivorship. But look here, she pointed to an amendment I'd never seen. Your grandmother added this codicil 2 months before she died. If any heir attempts to defraud or coerce another heir, their share is forfeited to the remaining siblings. My hands stopped shaking. They just triggered their own disinheritance. More than that. If they follow through on transferring your savings, that's wire fraud, federal crime, 5 years minimum. At 10 a.m., I walked into First National Bank with a briefcase full of documentation. The branch manager, Mrs. Peterson, had known me for 15 years. Every mortgage payment, every deposit had gone through her. I need to freeze all accounts where Mark Thompson has power of attorney, I said, sliding the recording transcript across her desk. And I need documentation of every transfer from my accounts to family members over the past 3 years. She printed 47 pages. 47 pages of my money flowing to Mark's business loans, Sarah's credit card payments, David's bar exam fees, my parents' cruise to Italy last spring. $127,000 total. Money I'd earned grading papers until midnight, teaching summer school, tutoring rich kids on Saturdays. Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Peterson said quietly, I always wondered why you never questioned these transfers. Most people would have. I trusted family, I said. I won't make that mistake again. My phone stayed silent all morning. They thought I was home crying, maybe packing my few belongings like a good little victim. Instead, I was in a lawyer's office signing papers that would demolish their lives. At noon, I drove past the house. Dad's truck was gone, probably at the bank trying to access my savings. Too late. Mark's BMW sat in the driveway, probably inside dividing up money that no longer existed. I parked across the street and called Riverside Realty. I'd like to list a property for sale, I told Jennifer Walsh, their top agent. $1.2 million home, prime location. I need it sold fast. How fast? This week. That afternoon, I sat in Starbucks on Main Street, uploading files to a secure cloud server. The recording. Bank statements. Copies of forged documents Mark thought he'd hidden. Screenshots of text messages where Sarah called me pathetic and David joked about finally getting rid of the dead weight. Every piece of evidence, backed up in triplicate. My phone finally buzzed at 4 p.m. Dad. Gracie, honey. There seems to be some confusion at the bank. Can you call me? I didn't. Another buzz. Mark, Grace, we need to talk. Something's wrong with your account access. Delete. Sarah. Stop being dramatic. This is about family. I almost laughed. Family. At sunset, I drove to Cedar Hill Cemetery where Grandma Rose was buried. I sat by her headstone, watching evening light filter through the oak trees she'd loved. I'm sorry I let them walk all over your memory, Grandma, I whispered. But that ends now. My phone rang one more time. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message. Grace, sweetheart, I think there's been some misunderstanding. We never meant for things to get so heated tonight. Family is family, right? We can work this out. Too little. Too late. I sealed the flash drive containing all evidence into an envelope marked confidential attorney work product and dropped it in the overnight slot at Margaret's law office. Then I called Jennifer Walsh one more time. Yes, proceed with the papers. I want the sale finalized before they know what hit them. They thought I was a chess piece in their game, but they didn't know this chessboard was built by me and I was about to flip it. They thought I was a chess piece in their game, but they didn't know this chessboard was built by me and I was about to flip it. 7 days. That's how long I let them celebrate. 7 days of them living in their house, planning renovations, dividing up my inheritance like vultures over roadkill. I knew because Mrs. Henderson next door called me twice, once to say a contractor's van was parked outside Tuesday morning, and again to mention the dumpster that appeared Wednesday for their remodeling project. They were so confident. So sure I'd slither away quietly like I always had. On Thursday at 2 p.m., I sat in my Honda Civic across the street, watching through the living room window as they gathered around that mahogany table again. Same seats, same smug faces. Mark had his laptop out, probably looking at expensive kitchen renovations. Sarah was showing Mom paint samples on her phone. Dad was measuring the fireplace wall for what looked like a new flat-screen TV. With my money, the FedEx truck turned onto Elm Street at exactly 2:17 p.m., just like I'd requested. Priority overnight delivery to the Thompson family residence, signature required. I watched the driver knock, watched Dad answer the door with irritation, probably expecting some mundane package. But this wasn't mundane. Through the window, I saw Dad carry the thick manila envelope back to the dining room. The whole family gathered around as he tore it open. I rolled down my window slightly. I wanted to hear this. The first scream came from Mom, high-pitched, disbelieving. What is this? What is this? Mark grabbed the papers, his lawyer brain trying to process what he was seeing. The deed. It's in Grace's name only, has been for 6 years, but that's impossible. Grace Michelle Thompson, Sarah read aloud, her voice shaking. Sole legal owner. She looked up, face pale. How is she the only owner? I smiled, remembering Margaret's explanation. Grandma Rose had been sharper than any of us knew. That codicil about disinheriting fraudulent heirs? It had kicked in the moment they started their little conspiracy. Dad's voice boomed through the window. There has to be a mistake. We revised the will. We had it changed. You had a fake will drawn up, I said, stepping out of my car and walking up their front path. The real one was filed with the state 6 years ago. You can't revise a will that's already been executed and recorded, Dad. Even Mark should know that. They all froze as I appeared in the living room doorway. The same doorway where Dad had slapped me 7 days ago. The same room where they'd humiliated me, dismissed me, thrown me out like garbage. But now I was holding all the cards. "Grace," Mom started, her voice suddenly sweet. "Honey, we can explain." "Explain what?" I walked to the dining room table, where my legal documents were scattered like playing cards. "Explain how you plan to steal my inheritance? Or how you already stole $43,000 from my savings account?" Mark went white. "How did you know about your little midnight meeting?" I pulled out my phone, the recording app still saved on the home screen. 43 minutes and 17 seconds of pure evidence. Every word, every laugh, every plan to destroy my life. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room. "She's so trusting, it's almost sad." Sarah's response: "It's pathetic. A 45-year-old woman with no husband, no kids, living off her family like some kind of spinster aunt." The blood drained from Sarah's face as her own words echoed back at her. "You want to know what's pathetic?" I said, stopping the recording. 23 years of sacrifice, of believing you actually loved me, of thinking family meant something more than what you could extract from it." I picked up the sale contract from the table. "This house sold yesterday for $1.2 million. Cash sale, 30-day close. The Martinez family moves in next Tuesday." "You can't sell our house," Dad shouted. "Your house?" I laughed, actually laughed. "You haven't paid a single bill on this house in 3 years. The mortgage, insurance, property taxes, utilities, all me. I have receipts going back to 2019. Mom tried a different approach, tears starting. "Grace, please, we're your family." "Family?" I stepped closer. "You slapped me. You called me a burden. You planned to steal everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing." I paused, letting that sink in. "You gave me 10 minutes to leave your house 7 days ago." I pulled out the eviction notice, official, court-stamped, legally binding. "I'm giving you 72 hours to leave mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark stared at the legal papers like they might spontaneously combust. Sarah's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Dad slumped into his chair, finally understanding that his construction worker daughter had just outmaneuvered his entire family of college graduates. "For 23 years, I believed you loved me," I said, my voice steady as steel. "Now I know the difference between real love and performance. And for the first time in my adult life, I walked away from that family on my own terms. And for the first time in my adult life, I walked away from that family on my own terms." The consequences came swift and merciless, like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Within 48 hours, Mark's construction loan was called in. Apparently, he'd used the family house as collateral for his business expansion, a house he never legally owned. When the bank discovered the true ownership status and impending sale, they demanded immediate repayment of $340,000. His business folded by Friday. Sarah's marketing firm dropped her as a partner when word spread through their professional network. In a city like Albany, reputation travels faster than gossip. She conspired to defraud her own sister, became the whisper that followed her to every networking event, every client meeting. Her income dried up within the month. David's law practice suffered the worst blow. The State Bar Association opened an ethics investigation based on Margaret's formal complaint, helping family members forge legal documents and plan inheritance fraud even as an observer violated multiple professional conduct rules. His license was suspended pending full review. But the cruelest consequence was the one they'd brought entirely upon themselves: social humiliation. Mrs. Henderson next door had heard the shouting match that Thursday afternoon. By evening, she'd called Mrs. Patterson across the street. By weekend, the whole neighborhood knew. The Thompson family, who'd lived on Elm Street for 30 years, who'd hosted block parties and Christmas open houses, had been squatting in their own daughter's home while plotting to steal her life savings. The story spread like wildfire through the local community Facebook group. They slapped out "the only child who ever cared for them and lost everything" became the most shared post in the group's history. Mom's book club quietly removed her from their mailing list. Dad's poker buddies stopped returning his calls. 6 months later, I drove past the old house on my way to the grocery store. A swing set now stood in the backyard where Dad used to complain about mowing. Bicycles leaned against the front porch I'd painted so many times. Children's laughter echoed from the garden where I'd planted Mom's roses that bloomed brighter than ever under the Martinez family's care. Through the kitchen window, I glimpsed Maria Martinez teaching her daughter to bake, flour dusting the counter where I'd once written check after check to keep that family afloat. The house had life again. Real life. The kind that comes from gratitude instead of entitlement. I'd bought a small cottage on the other side of town. Nothing fancy but entirely mine. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with morning sunlight, and a garden where I could grow whatever I wanted without someone claiming credit for my work. The mortgage payment was less than I'd been spending to maintain their lifestyle. That evening, I sat on my own front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. My phone had stopped ringing months ago. No more emergency calls, no more crisis management, no more guilt trips disguised as family loyalty. The silence wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. A year later, I received a Christmas card forwarded from my old address. Mark had found work as a site supervisor in Buffalo, a significant step down from business owner, but honest work. Sarah had moved to Rochester, starting over in a smaller firm. David was driving for Uber while waiting for his law license review. Mom and Dad had downsized to a senior apartment complex, their grand plans for home renovations replaced by the reality of fixed incomes and Social Security checks. The return address was in their handwriting, but I didn't open the card. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. I kept the Christmas card, though not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that truth has its own timeline, that justice doesn't always come from courts or lawyers or righteous anger. Sometimes it comes from simply refusing to enable the people who mistake your love for weakness. I spent 23 years believing that love meant sacrifice. Now I know it means boundaries, and for the first time in my life, I sleep peacefully knowing the difference. I spent 23 years believing that love meant sacrifice. Now I know it means boundaries. And for the first time in my life, I sleep peacefully knowing the difference. 2 years have passed since that October night when everything changed. I'm writing this from my kitchen table. My kitchen table in a cottage that smells like lavender and coffee, instead of resentment and manipulation. The morning light streams through windows I chose, in a home I earned, surrounded by silence that feels like freedom rather than loneliness. On the wall above my writing desk hangs a photo of Grandma Rose in her garden, hands dirty from planting, smile genuine and warm. Next to it, a smaller frame holds the deed to this cottage, my name alone on every line. No joint ownership, no family strings attached. Below that, a framed copy of Margaret's final letter confirming that all legal challenges to the house sale had been dismissed. Justice documented in triplicate. Last week, I received an unexpected visitor. Maria Martinez, the mother who bought the family house, knocked on my door with a plate of homemade empanadas and an invitation to her daughter's quinceañera. "The roses you planted are magnificent this year," she said, her eyes bright with genuine gratitude. "Sophia wants to thank the person who made our garden so beautiful." I attended that party and watched 3 generations of the Martinez family celebrate together, grandparents teaching children to dance, aunts braiding flowers into hair, uncles grilling meat while sharing stories and laughter. Real family. The kind where love flows in all directions instead of being extracted like payment. That night, sitting in my own garden with a glass of wine, I understood something fundamental about the difference between blood and family. Blood is an accident of birth. Family is built through respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. The Martinez family had become more family to me in 2 years than my biological relatives had been in 45. The moral lessons from that October betrayal crystallized slowly, like sediment settling in still water. Never underestimate someone who has given you everything. They mistake kindness for weakness, generosity for stupidity. But patience is not the same as powerlessness. And the person who has sacrificed the most often has the strongest foundation to stand on when the storm comes. Greed blinds the greedy, but justice has perfect vision. My siblings saw only dollar signs and personal gain. They couldn't see the legal documentation, the recorded evidence, the paper trail they'd created with their own hands. Their desperation for wealth made them careless with the very laws designed to protect inheritance rights. Some losses cannot be recovered, but truth always brings freedom. I lost the family I thought I had, but gained clarity about the family I actually had. The pain of that loss was temporary. The freedom of that truth is permanent. My phone still receives occasional calls from blocked numbers. Christmas cards still arrive with familiar handwriting that I don't open. Social media occasionally brings news through mutual acquaintances. Mark's business struggles, Sarah's continued job searches, David's ongoing legal troubles. I feel no pleasure in their difficulties, but I feel no responsibility for them either. They taught me sacrifice, but Grandma Rose taught me strength, and strength wins every time. Tonight, I'll pour myself another glass of wine and toast the woman I've become, not the grateful daughter who absorbed every slight, not the family doormat who paid every bill, not the sacrificial lamb who accepted every betrayal. Tonight, I toast the woman who learned that self-respect isn't selfish, that boundaries aren't cruel, and that justice isn't always served by courts or lawyers. Sometimes justice is served by simply refusing to enable the people who confuse your love with their entitlement. I raise my glass to you, Grandma Rose, and to everyone who's ever been told they're being difficult for refusing to be destroyed by the people who claim to love them. Family isn't blood. Family is who protects you, not who betrays you. And real love never asks you to sacrifice your dignity for someone else's greed. The truth will always win. It just takes time to arrive.